This video is part 2 of a video series describing the production of 6-sided Celtic ring patterns on the bandsaw using both the Accu-Facet System and the Accu-Slot system. In part 1 of this video series, we described the production of these 6-sided Celtic ring patterns, which a single insert was glued at each of the 6 sides of the 6-sided wood cylinder. In this video, I'll begin by first of all using the Accu-Facet System to produce the 6-sided wood cylinder blocks. We will then cut 2 slots in each face of the 6-sided cylinder using the Accu-Slot system to produce the double insert 6-sided Celtic ring patterns. I'll then glue in a contrasting colored wood insert, sand the insert flush to the sides of the block, and then turn them on the lathe to produce the final Celtic ring pattern. We'll be producing 2 different styles of Celtic ring patterns. We'll be using styles with parallel bands in the slots, and an additional style in which the different angles will be used. For additional details in producing the 6-sided Celtic ring patterns, as well as the 4-sided Celtic ring patterns, please review the additional videos on this subject listed on our website and are also listed in the description section page of this video. I'm using the Accu-Facet system on the bandsaw to produce the 6-sided wood cylinders. For additional details on the setup and operation of the Accu-Facet system, please review part 1 of this video series or the other videos on the Accu-Facet system listed on our website. For this project, I used a 12-position pattern disc. I skipped every second index position to produce the 6-sided cylinder. The result is a 6-sided cylinder with perfect sides and angles. After installing the Accu-Slot system on the bandsaw, I first positioned the 6-sided wood block on the Accu-Slot table, which had been set to a 55-degree angle. I adjust the stop on the Accu-Slot rail for the first cut. I will then be using a 3/16 inch thick brass spacer to place between the end of the board and the stop on the rail. This will give me about a 1/8 inch spacing between the 2 parallel slots. Once again, I place labels on the 6 sides of the wood block, labeled 1 through 6, for proper sequencing. I first of all make sure that the stop on the Accu-Slot fence is secure and that the stop on the Accu-Slice rail is set and secure. As before, this stop has been set to about a 1/4 inch spacing between the bandsaw blade and the Accu-Slot fence so as not to cut into the fence. I push the 6-sided board against the stop, against the fence, with the flat side of the board flat against the tabletop. I then use 3 clamps to hold the board in place. The reason I'm making 2 cuts at the same time is just to speed up the operation of cutting and gluing. After completing the first cut, I loosen the clamps, move the board to the right, insert the brass spacer between the board and the stop, reposition the board, and clamp it in place. I then cut the second slot. Okay, let me sand my fuzzies off these 2 slots. You see this board did move there, but it should be good. And then we'll glue some inserts in. In this previous set of projects, I tried a couple different clamping methods. I first of all tried rubber bands, and that didn't seem to have quite enough pressure. So then I went to a C-clamp, which seemed to work a little bit better. But every now and then I put a little too much pressure with a C-clamp, and actually the wood started to twist and move. There's so little meat holding those 2 pieces of wood together that too much pressure and it'll just move and shift on you, so you got to be very careful. So I came up with a new jig to try and improve on this process of clamping up after I cut my slots and put my inserts in. So the way this will work, I have it set up for doing this cedar block I'll be doing shortly. And I'll be setting it in here like this. And this is just nothing more than a parallel clamp. And I'm trying to keep my jaws parallel. So when I clamp down, I'll have nice even pressure against the entire piece. There won't be more pressure on one edge or side than the other. And I have them raised up a little bit, then I'm just clamping the top. This is where the insert will go in. And I'll show that in a few minutes after I glue my first inserts. You don't need too much pressure. Too much pressure could still distort the wood, but enough pressure to squeeze out the excess glue and make sure you have a good tight joint. Okay, I'm ready to glue these two inserts, and these are both some red heart inserts that I'll glue in there. So first thing, let me get some glue into the slot. I'm applying Type Bond 3 glue to both of the slots. This is a messy operation, so I'm using gloves for this operation. I use a separate 30,000 inch thick board to push the glue into the slots. I add glue to both sides of this board to help get the glue into the slots. Be sure to push the board thoroughly over the entire inner surface to ensure that all of the inner surfaces have some glue on these surfaces. I then coat both sides of this first red heart wood insert with the glue and spread it out so that all of the surface is thoroughly coated with the glue. I then push this insert into the slot, making sure that it is pushed the entire way into the slot and bottoms out in the bottom of the slot. It may be necessary to use a small pick to move the spacer between the two slots in order to insert this spacer. In a likewise manner, repeat this operation for the second wood insert. Make sure the two red heart wood inserts thoroughly bottom out in the bottom slots of the wood block. I'm using a parallel clamp setup described previously to clamp the assembly and squeeze out the excess glue. I allowed this glued up assembly to set up and dry for at least 1 hour. After the glue had dried, the inserts were sanded flush to the sides of the block on the edge sander, as shown in part 1 of this video. Well, there's the first 2 layers in there. Came out pretty good. So I'm ready for layer 2 now. The process was repeated as before, positioning the block against the stop, tightening the clamps, and then cutting the first slot. The block was then moved once again. The brass spacer was installed between the block and the stop, and the second cut was then made. The red heart spacers were glued in as before, and the process was repeated for the remaining 4 sides of the block. This is the 6th and final side of the 6-sided block. The process of cutting the slots and then gluing in the red heart inserts was again repeated for this final side. After the glue had dried, the inserts were sanded flush to the sides of the 6-sided wood block using the edge sander. Here's our 6-sided cylinder with double rings. After I glued the inserts, I sanded it flush to the sides of the 6-sided cylinder, and now we're ready to turn it. And there's the finished 6-sided double ring Celtic knot pattern. The wood I used for this is hickory, and the inserts are red heart. For this next Celtic ring pattern, we want to have multiple inserts at different angles, radiating at a single point in the center of the project. This is a 4-sided example I made several years ago, in which I have 3 different inserts going at 3 different angles, all meeting in the center at one single point. So this is a 4-sided project. So I'm going to do the same thing now, but on a 6-sided project. So I'll be doing 3 different angles on this project. This is a piece of cedar, and I'll be using some maple whitewood inserts. And again, this is where the laser beam will really be handy, because I'll be able to get these to meet exactly in the center, using the laser beam as a guide. And this next project is, again, a 6-sided cylinder, and I'm going to be making 3 inserts at 3 different angles, and then all radiating at a single point in the center. And so I'll be setting 3 different angles, and every time I change the angle on here, I have to reset my position of the bandsaw blade from the fence, because this distance changes every time I change the angle on the fence. So this first one is set for 55 degrees. And again, that's spacing just a little over 1/4 inch thick. And I have my piece of cedar with the 6 sides. And start with position 1. Once again, I did label these, 1, 2, so I keep the sequence and know exactly where I'm going to be. So I have my first position set. I have 3 clamps again. First clamp clamping it against the stop, and then a second clamp on the left side of the beam, and the other clamp on the opposite side of the beam. And again, the purpose of these 2 clamps here is so the wood doesn't move or warp as it's being cut. It's especially as you're cutting sequential cuts. You've added some water to the wood with your glue, and as a result that wood has a tendency to warp as you're cutting. So it's not so critical with this first cut, but with all subsequent cuts it's quite critical because the wood does move as you're cutting. So this second clamp keeps that piece of wood from moving. So once again, I either sand the fuzzies off this bottom edge or the bandsaw blade. That's a little bit of a burr, and you see the fuzzies there on that bottom edge. So first of all, I have to put some glue inside my slot here. My curve of my slot here is around 44-45 thousandths. And this piece of insert that I'm using to push the glue in is around 20-25 thousandths. It gives me enough clearance that I can slide it easy and get the glue, pushed down inside that hole. Because it is important you get glue the whole way down in the slot. And I can actually put some glue on this board. It's going to be a little messy. And I can feel there's glue the whole way down inside there. Then I have my piece of maple insert. Again, coat both sides of this with glue. Make sure that's pushed down the whole way. So it's fully seated to the bottom of the slot. Wipe off the excess glue. Okay, we're ready to use this new jig. Like I said, I'm only going to use this knob for tightening. So I'm pushing it down, my top side facing up, and then clamp it. Just enough to squeeze out the excess glue. It keeps everything nice, straight, and parallel. It works pretty good. I let that dry for about an hour. Okay, I've completed all 6 inserts on this 6-sided block. Now I need to change my angle, so I'm going from 55, changing it down to 70 degrees. Whenever I change the angle, I got to change my stop first thing. So I'll put my spacer on here, move it against the blade, and then adjust my stop. Then I put my board back on here. And this is where the laser is important because I have my pieces and I want it to intersect right in the middle of that X. So I want my beam to go right through the center like that. So I push my board against my stop, then adjust this stop down here to get it right where it crosses in the middle. And then lock this in place. And that should go right through the center of my X there. Kind of check the other side, see how they're going to line up. And they all look pretty good. Okay, so let me put my first one in here. Put all my clamps on here. And now we're ready for our first cut. I then glued in the insert, allowed it to dry for about 2 hours, and then I sanded the inserts flush to the 6 sides of the block. In a likewise manner, I repeated the process on the remaining 5 sides of the block. I was originally planning on cutting 3 slots on each side of the wood block, but the pattern was just too busy, and I decided to stop at 2 slots. After all the inserts had been glued into the block and dry, they were then sanded on the edge center, flush to the sides of the block. This is the resulting 6-sided cylinder with 2 inserts on each side, one at 70 degrees and one at 55 degrees. And it really looks like a complicated maze of lines here. So see what it looks like when it is turned. I was originally planning on doing 3 angles, but I thought it would just be too busy, and it is pretty busy even with 2 inserts on each face. So that's 2 times 6, there's 12 inserts in this piece of wood. So now we'll turn it and see what it looks like. So now you can see the pattern with just 2 inserts on each side. It's kind of the reason I decided not to go more than 2. It would have been just way, way too busy. So let me finish turning this down to the final shape. Trying to get a little bit of a goblet here. So we'll see how it comes out. So I did shape this down, hollowed out the inside, sanded it down to a 400 grit sandpaper. And I said I did hollow the inside. And I started out by first of all using a Forstner bit and drilling down like 2.5 inches inside to hollow it out. But at the bottom I get a little bit of a point, and that's from the Forstner bit. And that needs either to be sanded out or ground out with a lathe chisel. So I made a tool to eliminate that problem. And what I did is I got in this case a 1 3/8 inch spar bit. I ground off the tip, rounded off the corners, and then put edges on this so it's more like a drill bit. As the piece turns in the lathe, this cuts the sides and also cuts the bottom. And that gets rid of the indent at the bottom of the vessel, smooths it out, and requires a lot less sanding or cutting with your lathe tool to get it nice and round and smooth. This gives you a nice shape to your one also. I actually made 2 of these. This is a 1 3/8 inch for these larger bowls. Then I made a 7/8 inch model for some of the smaller bowls I'm working on. It just saves a lot of sanding and cutting with your lathe tool at the bottom of the bowl. It gives you a nice smooth finish, and I'll show that later when I take this off the lathe. So let me go ahead and cut this off, and I'll show you the inside of the bottom here, and then we'll finish this with some bush oil and then polyurethane finish. Well, that shows the bottom of the bowl that was cut out using that new chisel that I made from a spar bit. So it's nice and smooth at the bottom, rounded out. There's no hole from the Forstner bit. So that's our finished piece, ready to be finished. Shown here is a comparison of a 4-sided double Celtic ring pattern and a 6-sided double Celtic ring pattern. In both these projects, 2 parallel inserts were inserted into each face of the starting wood block. The six-sided double Celtic ring project on the right was constructed from hickory wood with red heart inserts. The angle of the inserts was 55 degrees with a 1/8 inch spacing between the two inserts. Any more than 2 inserts on a face on this project would have just been too busy. I could have added 2 90-degree inserts above and below the center pattern for some additional details in this project. Here are 2 additional double parallel 6-sided Celtic ring pattern projects. Both of these projects were constructed from a eucalyptus 6-sided wood block. In the project on the left, the insert was a multi-layer laminated wood insert. In the project on the right, I used both a red heart and a walnut wood insert. In both these projects, the angle of the inserts was 55 degrees, and the spacing between the inserts was 1/8 inch. When clamping this project on the right, I used a little too much pressure with the C-clamp, and one of the layers moved, which explains a wider walnut band in one of the inserts. This is a comparison of a 4-sided Celtic ring pattern and a 6-sided Celtic ring pattern with multiple inserts on a face at different angles. The inserts all intersect in the center of the face of the wood blocks. In the 4-sided Celtic ring pattern on the left, I inserted 3 inserts on each face at different angles, but intersecting in the center. In the 6-sided Celtic ring pattern on the right, I only inserted 2 inserts on each face of the 6-sided starting cylinder. I was originally planning on 3 inserts, as was done for the 4-sided pattern on the left, but it was just too busy. Even this double insert pattern is quite busy. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments on this video, please leave a comment, give us a call, or send us an email. For additional details on the systems used in this video, please visit our website. Also on our website are a number of videos describing the production of 4-sided Celtic ring patterns. The gallery on our website shows many examples of these Celtic ring patterns. You can also view part 1 of this video series for additional details on the use of the Accu-Facet and Accu-Slot systems to produce some single ring 6-sided Celtic ring patterns.